Big week for the Coalition. It's a big week for Dan Tehan, the Shadow Energy Minister, who joins me live from Hobart. Dan Tehan, how are you feeling about the week ahead?
Andrew, it's an important week because the issues that we're discussing are absolutely incredible for the future of our nation, incredibly important for the future of our nation. So making sure that we can have energy prices which are affordable, not only for households but for business as well, so we can compete internationally and still continue to do our part when it comes to emissions reduction is incredibly important, and I'm looking forward to the week ahead.
All right, so you're going to do something about energy prices in your policy. Can you tell us what that is? Are you going to actually say this is how I can get prices down, or is it more just a sort of helicopter position on the views on emissions reduction and energy of the Coalition?
Well, Andrew, we'll have a discussion on Wednesday and then on Thursday, and then hopefully as a coalition on Sunday to nail our policy approach. But I can tell you the best thing that you can do to get energy prices down is pursue energy abundance. You have to make sure that all sources of energy are coming into the system, because the more you've got coming into the system, the cheaper it's going to be. So obviously that's going to be a key part of the discussions that we're having on Wednesday and Thursday, while also we have to make sure that we're doing our fair share when it comes to emissions reduction. Would
you look then at government subsidies for either coal, gas or nuclear power stations?
Well, look, we will have those discussions and we will obviously, our policy will come out of those discussions. But there is no doubt that working with the state governments to make sure that coal-fired generation can continue at the moment is absolutely crucial to bringing prices down, as is the fact that we need much more gas in our system, and we need much more gas in our system right here and now. We can't wait for that to happen. So there are key things that we'll be discussing, and we'll have more detail when we finalise our policy on Wednesday and Thursday.
That sounds like government funding for coal and gas generation.
No, what I'm saying is we need to make sure that we're sweating those coal assets, continue to sweat those coal assets, and also that we can get more gas into the system much more quickly. Now, obviously, when it comes to sweating those coal assets, you've got to be able to work cooperatively with state governments. As you know, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland are all looking to coal to make sure that they can keep prices down. So you've got to be able to work with them as they sweat their coal assets, and we've got to work right across the nation when it comes to gas. We just need more gas. The government has been completely asleep at the wheel when it comes to getting more gas into the system. As a matter of fact, Chris Bowen wouldn't say the word.
Look, I just want to, when you mean sweat coal assets, you mean keeping them open for longer than is currently planned, don't you? When you're saying sweat coal assets?
Well, absolutely, and that's what state governments are doing already.
But you're saying even further. So Queensland's done it for, even longer, up to 2040 or whatever. Eraring in places like that, we're still only looking at 2030. Are you suggesting coal-fired generation in those sort of plants should occur later than is currently planned, even with state government extensions?
Well, if it's needed, that's what's going to happen, and that'll be part of the discussions that we're having on Wednesday and Thursday, absolutely.
All right, are you prepared to dump the term net zero in the submission you'll put to Shadow Cabinet?
So right through this process, Andrew, I've been very respectful for my colleagues. There is a multitude of views within the Coalition as to what our energy and emissions reduction policy should look like. And what I'm seeking to do is make sure that I've listened to all those views, that I've also been out discussing what's happening on the ground with industry, with business, seeing the impact that these higher energy prices are having on households. And I've said, I will bring forward options for us to be able to consider of what is the right way for us to proceed.
And
now,
does one of those options, Dan Tehan, does one of those options include dumping the term net zero as an aspiration, as a target, as anything?
Well, Andrew, you'll have to wait and see about that, right? I'm not going to announce this morning what it will be, what I'll be taking forward, because that's not been respectful to my colleagues. I want to make sure that I engage with them in a way that they know that I'm incredibly serious about getting the right policy, and that means doing it in a way that they're not reading about it in the newspaper or on your show.
Well, I'm doing my best. Well, they're all watching my show, I'm sure.
You are.
Look, the moderates want to keep net zero, right? Possibly still by 2050, and at the very least by the end of the century. But people in the right of your party see the target or aspiration or phrase of net zero as toxic and want it gone. Do you understand both points of view, and how on earth do you resolve that difference?
I do understand both points of view, and in the end, what we've got to be able to do is come together under the one policy. Now, I always said this would be like threading a needle, but that's the challenge, and what we have to do as a Liberal Party and as a coalition is ultimately be able to come together and unite behind a policy. Now, the National Party have, as a party room, decided what their policy should be. I want to thank David Littleproud and members of the National Party for the respectful way they've engaged with me over the last 6 months, and they've done it incredibly confidentially.
Do you want to, Dan Tehan, do you want to thank them for front-running you? Do you want to thank them for putting, as Anne Ruston said in the leadership phone call you were on last week, a gun to your head on this policy? Don't you think it would have been easier for you if the Nationals worked with you on a joint announcement?
But you forget, Andrew, that the decision was taken, and it was taken 5 months ago, that the National Party would have their process, we would have our process, and then we would come together. And I've respected that from day one.
But they beat you to the punch.
Very good
Dan Tehan, because you took so long in your process, they beat you to the punch, and now they look like they're running the show, that they're the tail that's wagging the dog.
Well, I don't agree with that. We've had very good discussions right through the last 5 months. I think I've met with David and members of our working group every week that Parliament sat, and we've worked through these issues. And, you know, for the Australian people, let's be serious about this. Who went first or who went second? Who cares? What they care about is you're getting energy affordability right, you're doing your bit when it comes to emissions reduction, and you're making sure that international competitiveness in this nation will not be handcuffed by a terrible, terrible energy policy, which we're seeing at the moment under this Albanese Labor government.
Do you think the Nationals' emission reduction target of 30 to 40% reduction in emissions from 2005 levels by 2035 is reasonable, bearing in mind that we've already seen a 28% reduction?
Well, look, one of the things that is often forgotten in these discussions and debates is our track record when we were in government, which is, when it comes to emissions reduction, far superior to that of the current Albanese Labor government. As a matter of fact, they're flatlining. Emissions reduction is flatlining under Chris Bowen. And not only that, we've got electricity prices at 39% increase. So it's an abject failure. So what we've got to do is make sure we're getting the balance right. And the National Party have said this is what we think the right balance is. And we obviously are going to look at that, and then we will have discussions on Wednesday and Thursday and see where we come up with, and then we'll bring all that together and we'll have a strong, united position to be able to take the government on.
Fair enough, but I guess I'm seeking an answer from you as to whether you personally think that's ambitious enough.
Well, it's not about what I think personally. It's about what we collectively, as a Liberal Party and a National Party, and then as a coalition think, and then how we go about advocating for that and at the same time pointing out to the Australian people what an abject failure Chris Bowen is.
Now, the Nationals' position is to stay in the Paris Agreement, but it was pointed out to me yesterday the Paris Agreement is for a global net zero emissions target by 2100, Dan Tehan. So it's been put to me that you could stick to the Paris, like you could come out and say we commit to the Paris Agreement, but Australia might not have to get to net zero within that. Do you agree with that?
Well, look, it gets quite complex, Andrew, but I think the most important thing is the National Party were clear that they want to stay within Paris. Now, obviously, that'll be part of the discussions that we have on Wednesday and Thursday as well. And, you know, I look forward to hearing the views of my colleagues around that and then around what we should be doing in terms of the different types of energy we should be getting into the system.
No, I understand that, Dan Tehan, but I just want to bring you back to my question. Yep. Is it not fair to say that you could say we're staying within Paris, but that might not involve Australia itself going to net zero by 2100?
Well, there's all sorts of semantics when it comes to how you would judge what happens if you stay within Paris or if you get out of Paris. And I'm not going to get into those semantics here, Andrew. What I want to do is make sure that when we have the discussion on Wednesday and Thursday, we know that the National Party have committed to Paris. We obviously have to make a decision on that and a variety of other issues as well. And then what that signifies. So we'll have those discussions on Wednesday and Thursday, and then we'll have more to say on Sunday when we come together as a coalition.
All right. Would you, because you haven't mentioned it really, would you like to see a nuclear policy again? And would that be publicly or privately owned in your opinion, given they had difficulty with selling that it had to be publicly owned at the last election?
I absolutely want to see a nuclear policy, and we've already committed through the coalition agreement to lifting the ban, and that will be very much part of the discussions we have on Wednesday and Thursday. This government, the Albanese
public ownership,
is not serious about it.
Public ownership or private ownership?
There are various ways you can look at how you would fund this, and one of the things, you know, government can just take a golden share when it comes to ensuring the capital that's invested comes from, you know, very good sources to make sure that proper safety procedures are put in place, but then you can get private capital in. So that'll be all part of the discussions that we'll have on Wednesday and Thursday. But can I tell you, the Albanese Labor government are not serious about emissions reduction if they won't look at nuclear. That is what every major industrialised country around the world is doing, because they want reliable energy and to be doing their bit on emissions reduction.
Sure.
And the fact that they won't even contemplate it shows what relics they are.
Nearly out of time here. I just want to ask a couple more things. I've heard criticism of Susan Lee's leadership, that some of your colleagues say she's not up to it, that it's difficult for her to enunciate what she stands for. What do you make of that?
Well, look, Andrew, what I would say to all my colleagues is let's focus on getting the policies right. Let's make sure that after the worst election defeat that we have suffered since the Second World War, that we start to get a policy platform that we can enunciate and take to the Australian people, which shows that we are incredibly serious about presenting a proper alternative at the next election. So that is what everyone should be focusing on, because without that,
is she up to it? Is Susan Lee up to it? Is she up to being leader?
Absolutely. She was voted in as leader after the May election. The majority in the party room said she was the person that should lead us to the next election. Now, what we need to do now is get on and do our job, and that is, Susan has said we need a proper policy platform, and we're going about doing that now, and that's what everyone needs to be doing, because without that policy platform, then we will see a similar result at the next election.
Now, you're a friend of Josh Frydenberg's and a former numbers man for him. Do you think he should run for Kooyong at the next election?
Well, that ultimately is a decision for Josh. He's obviously gone off. He's got a very successful business career. His kids are still young, so ultimately he'll weigh up what he wants to do. So that's very much a decision for him. What I'm obviously focused on at the moment is trying to make sure we've got an energy and emissions reduction policy that we can take the fight up with the Australian people and to the government in this term of government.
Sure, Dan Tehan, but how do you think Josh Frydenberg would fare in the seat of Kooyong with the Liberal Party opposing net zero?
Well, ultimately, I'm not going to prejudge and say, what we're going to do or what we're not going to do, because once you start asking all these if questions, Andrew, then you get yourself in a lot of trouble. So let's just focus this week on making sure we get an energy and emissions reduction policy in place, and then the rest will take care of itself. But that's my focus this week, and that's what I hope to achieve.
Dan Tehan, thanks so much for your time.